cemetery, you see that?
Oh, I did not see that.
These are, they passed and they,
Okay.
and then I actually have the agreements, but unfortunately they're printed two-sided. So I might just use that on the next one.
Okay.
If you get one,
Yeah.
your new business, is it a renter at your facility? Is it a relative of yours?
No, we're gonna own it. We're gonna own it.
Good. How are you?
Rosinelli's gonna operate for us. And so it'll be a third facility.
Excited for
What was that?
Mayor, that's
Weather.
behind the counter.
Might be the only one.
So, yeah. Consulting fee that they're, Ron has a connection to someone who's been in the business in other states and knows the business.
Oh, I didn't write the agreement yet for that one.
Okay.
Because of the discussion tonight, so. It would not be included in the agreement.
Sounds good. I'd asked her the,
Have you looked
Concept
over
one
those
here.
scenarios?
The budget?
it says
What are you
siding,
leaning toward?
roofing, et
What's-
cetera. It's like $250,000. But our policy specifically states it has to be work visible from street or Lakeside Park. I don't know why Lakeside Park's listed in there, but they have a flat roof. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure even if you eliminated the cost of roofing, they'd still have this. And she said, yeah. And she said it'll be in the final resolution and
How about yourself?
theoretically come back to us.
I'm trying to think what would, keeping in mind,
I think it's been a long time since this
Blake's
place has
comment
been
about
revamped, so it'll look
the
nice.
city
Yeah.
struggling with
People that like our
still 14% increase.
historic
Um,
portions of downtown,
what-
I mean,
what's
that's one of the big
The
buildings
least
left.
amount of damage.
I think when they put in that giant thing on the north,
What's that?
I have a
Corner,
whole second copy.
the roundabout,
Beautiful.
Look at that.
that was the one.
Looky there.
Yeah, yeah.
No, those are
Like, we're never gonna be White Lake or Stillwater after that.
That's why, my thought is, some of these things get, once they start redeveloping that really brick and sandstone and stuff that's behind us, that.
Are we going to discuss them
You know,
each,
kind of like that.
but
They
then
won't want to tear down.
get out the opinions from the others?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm okay with glass and like
This was a
stainless
surprise how
and, like,
fast that got
that
burned up.
style as well, similar to the, the Dawn building at the old City Hall complex. And it's time.
Yeah, and that.
Going from nothing to almost all of it.
It just goes to show
But
how
vinyl siding's not gonna stand.
No.
important
No,
change
yeah, and
policy
that
was
gets-
to make it
Hard,
Yeah.
hard to escape.
laborious.
See these, some of these towns like Stillwater and Red Wing, wherever that, or Baronsville, they have the money to make like quality stuff that they're already stupid.
Labor was cheap there too.
Yeah.
Really cheap.
Hey, Chris.
Hello?
And they
How are
only had
ya?
so much time in the world.
I'm well. Same spot. We're trying to keep you guys
Oh, what I was gonna say.
in your same spaces.
This-
Well, you separated
this
Chris and
business
me.
doesn't exist yet at all, but
Brian.
I
That
get
was
that we have
intentional.
to allow it.
I know.
Otherwise, the state's just
It was to
gonna,
help
like,
Jonathan
roll
out a
it in
little,
and
have
you're
some
gonna have-
seasoned voices on each side of
Right,
him.
sure.
Ah, okay.
Oh,
Nice try, but.
I'm serious. I
Over-
intend
The only
to
time
do
I got
that.
to chat with
Yeah,
Chris.
I mean, they're to that point, they are coming, and so I mean, higher end, not a shady smoke shop type thing. It's comfortable going. Security from the state and everything is, I mean, it's.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
is-
sure.
This is the last year of my term. Am I up January 1st?
That's.
Is that the date that I expire?
Abby question.
Oh, okay.
Just
Hey,
want
Ab-
to know how soon she's released from service.
When do I expire?
This
That's
one's
not
mine,
the
right?
way to put it. Hi, Jonathan, you're up on the, you're up there. Let me see, I
No
can check
hiding
that.
now.
Welcome. I'm Jenny Lorge. That's Chris White.
Surrounded by real estate agents.
Seasoned,
What?
seasoned members.
Yes.
I'm not sure, but I think it's that.
Hi. Thanks for joining us.
I think so.
No. December, Jenny,
End of December?
yep,
So January 1st.
yep.
Good, okay, thank you.
Actually, let me look, because all other commissions run through January.
Okay.
Appointments occur in January, so I'll have an update at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Getting off the hook that easy.
Just trying to plan my life.
Are you gonna leave us then, Jenny, or not?
That'll be the end of my 7th year, so I think I expire by then. Yeah.
But are you not interested in, are you interested in staying on? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I didn't know that was an option. Yeah, I would, I love the involvement, yes,
Yeah,
love staying on top
okay.
of stuff. But I thought I kind of timed out after.
EDA may be different, so I'll get some information on our next agenda.
Appointed, right?
I don't
There
think there's
might
any
be
term
term
limit.
limits in the EDA.
I was on for 15 years.
Oh, were you? Well,
I don't think there's term
They
limits
couldn't
for
get rid of
anything.
you.
Maybe that's changed.
well, no, but it's just the EDA has old bylaws, so I wouldn't know if, I just want to make sure.
Yep.
But I'll
Makes
provide it
sense.
the next meeting for sure.
All right, well, we're right at 5:30, so why don't we get the meeting started on this beautiful summer evening? And Abby, you want to do roll call?
Commissioner Roberts,
Here.
Commissioner Legness,
Present.
Commissioner Lorge,
Here,
Commissioner Wright,
Here.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Here.
I just note for the record, Commissioners Grindal and is absent, Chair President Erickson.
Here. Think if you would, let's rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have an agenda before us. Does anybody want to make any changes, or I'll seek a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
A motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we have an agenda. We have open forum on our agenda this evening. It's an opportunity for any citizen to speak for 3 minutes on any topic. Just ask you to state your name and address for the record. Nope. And seeing no one interested in open forum, we'll close that and bring the agenda back. We've got a consent agenda. Looks like we don't have any items on said consent agenda. So we'll move right into our regular agenda, including some forgivable loans and the incentive program. Abby, do you want to walk us through what's on the?
I sure
that?
do. So at your last regularly scheduled meeting, you approved the updated CIIP program, the Commercial Improvement Incentive Program, which provides forgivable loans for commercial and industrial property improvements throughout the city. As a reminder, this expanded in a few different ways. One, it was expanding to any property within the city, not just in limited zoning districts, but then also a few different funding tiers. Since that meeting, we've had overwhelming interest in the program. Go figure, which is great because we went so many years without having interest in it. So I did note in here 5 different applications that have been accepted from Miller and Stevens, Pizza Pub, Forest Lake Family Dental, Rural South Drug, and OSI, in various different funding levels. The projects at 92 Lake Street South, just gonna reference that, Miller and Stevens, 8241 North Shore Trail North, Pizza Pub, and 69 Lake Street North, Forest Lake Family Dental, all conform to the requirements of the CIAP. Therefore, staff has prepared EDA resolutions for approval. The projects at 107 Lake Street North and 146 Lake Street North, so that is Roll Seth and OSI. And it's probably not fair to put OSI because I think it is a multi-tenant building, but that is their maybe flagship largest tenant in the building. They both started the projects before submitting their applications. Neither of the projects have been completed, though. The projects conform to the intent of the program and should be considered by the EDA. If the EDA did want to fund them, staff would bring back formal resolutions and agreements for consideration. So tonight, I'd recommend you discuss the projects, those that have been started and or completed. And then once you've determined how to proceed with the applications, I would recommend you move to direct staff to prepare forgivable loan agreements, if appropriate, for those two that have already started. And then move to approve resolutions 07072501 through 07072503, approving forgivable loan agreements as presented. And I know Jim Garrison, one of the landowners, Roll Seth Drug at 107 Lake Street North, is here if you have questions for him. Several of the other applicants had just advised that they had predetermined family commitments. If we would have pushed it out a month, they could have been here, but they all thank you for the consideration of this. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Abby on these projects?
I do. Member Chair, do you intend to take these maybe one by one for discussion, and then I could ask my question? I have questions on a couple of the items. Should
Yeah,
we
let's do that.
do it that way?
Yeah.
On the Miller and Stevens one, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about Miller and Stevens project?
I'll motion to approve the resolution on Miller and Stevens as recommended by staff. It's resolution 07072501.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. We got a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and that project is approved. How about on the pizza pub? Anybody have any questions on pub?
That one I do. So when I looked at our last meeting agenda, and the policy that we approved, under ineligible properties, it specifically says tax exempt properties and properties where a city or EDA official has financial interest. I think the second of those two could be debated, whether the city officials have a city interest or something, but certainly that property is on tax exempt city property within the right of way for the construction of the parking lot, as I understand it. Is that correct, Abby?
That is, and I can show the EDA what exactly Commissioner Langness is asking about. You can give me a second, I'll pull up the property. The Pizza Pub has their own parking lot and has recently asked the city council, and the city council has agreed to install at their expense public parking adjacent to their property at 8241 North Shore Trail. I should just take a quick second to come up on the screen for you folks.
We have it.
You have it? Okay, great. So this is North Shore through here. We have a landscaped boulevard that the public has been parking in an angled fashion in. There's no zoning ordinances that were in violation when the angled parking went into place. There were challenges recently in the spring when there was right-of-way changes that the adjacent landowner had done to improve the parking, but under-improve it just with some aggregate base, some gravel. In discussions with the city about trying to rectify that, the owner has agreed to install pull-off parallel parking adjacent to North Shore Trail, adjacent to their property. It would be public parking, but it would be installed and maintained by the landowner adjacent to the public parking, so the Pizza Pub. That would be deeded to the property, recorded against the property, an encumbrance for future landowners as well. So staff, I will fully admit I didn't necessarily think about the fact that the parking is going to be placed in the public right-of-way, publicly owned land. It was more about the improvement that the landowner would be making. And so that one definitely is up for EDA, I think, discussion of whether or not it really fits with the the intent of the EDA program.
All right, thank you. Other thoughts or comments? You bring up a very good point, Commissioner Legness.
I mean, I can expand on my concern when I look at that. And for the record, Pizza Pub is one of my most favorite restaurants to go to, so it has nothing against the business or anything that I'm suggesting this. I think as we established this policy a month ago, we should be very consistent in how we apply it. And if at some point, and I may add a couple of these other ones later, suggest that we should have exception at time, I think it's really our job to look at two things when we're approving these. The first being, does it fit the narrative of what we authored in the policy? And staff has done a very good job of establishing that, although I think on this one detail, I don't think it's really clear here that this would be an improvement to that property fitting of this plan. Doesn't mean that I don't want the parking to get fixed or anything of that nature, but I think we really need to look at denying it on that basis alone. The second component is, do I think this is good use of funds for the purposes of the policy? And in all honesty, I'm not sure on that one, and I'd like other people's thoughts on it, but for me, I'm leaning towards a denial on this particular one.
Well, I know when I, in the past, have brought up parking to Abby, in my own mind, it was looking at parking lots that are broken around town that need fixed and maybe need some encouragement too. It wasn't necessarily, in my own opinion, designed to create new parking, at least in the essence or the heart of that part of the program. So I can appreciate what you're saying there, Commissioner.
On the other hand, we're about the success and supporting the success of businesses, and Pizza Pub has had a parking problem.
They've had a parking problem for the last 20 years, and like you just said, I was thinking the exact same thing. Our job is to try and help keep somebody there longer than 4 or 5 years, and then the answer always is after the 4 or 5 years, we didn't have enough parking. They're willing to maintain it and pay for it. Public, what are we gonna do with it? It's just gonna sit there. I personally would say okay to it, but that's just me.
And me.
President, can I ask a question
Yes,
of
please.
staff? Remind me, and maybe some of the members recall this, what was the idea of the if it's tax exempt, that piece of why we made the decision? I don't recall that conversation, and I may have missed it.
I think one of the intents of the program, and although it wasn't maybe written in black and white, was to generally increase tax base. And so on tax-free parcels, you're not necessarily increasing tax base. I'd have to just take off my screen here to bring up the intents of that CIIP program again, but I think that we wrote out several of them, including supporting local business, increasing tax base, increasing aesthetics.
I think on this one, even though that is city right away, that it definitely is going to add taxable value to that property as being more user-friendly, more parking, therefore going to add value to that property. So I get what Commissioner Langness is saying, and maybe it has to be a caveat or some kind of a change in that, how that's worded, but if you're talking off-street parking downtown and you add more off-street parking, it's going to help those property values of those downtown businesses. And this is kind of almost the same thing, in my eyes, is you're adding value to that facility, that property with off-street parking.
Abby, can you speak to the policy specifically as it relates to disallowing tax-exempt properties? Is that by default then disallow maybe some nonprofit-owned parcels?
Yes, it would. And again, I think that was just kind of trying to tie it back to the intent of the program.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we want to incentivize investment in properties, but we wanted to have more than just an intrinsic or aesthetic benefit. We wanted to, and the benefit of the business, we wanted it to also have then that potential taxable increase.
Sure. We've heard some different opinions on this, which is fair and should be the case in any good committee. Is there any other issues particular or related to this property that we want to call out? Anybody who needs to call out?
Member Chair.
Mm-hmm.
So
I can,
I think the strongest argument against it is the one that I've established, that it doesn't fit the policy. I would go back to when this particular business, which is unique because it is in a residential zoning district. This is a legal non-conforming use on that property effectively. And I think it's very different when we have a downtown district where we have a municipal parking lot, and we have on-street parking that we might establish through various funding mechanisms or plans that we put together or we contribute to, and we have done that with our downtown plan and other means. But the mechanism that this business exists is through a very different piece of code in our city. They're operating under a conditional use permit, effectively. And part of that, when that went through for this property, gave them, and I understand it wasn't Pizza Pub, it was multiple businesses ago, but the building alone was allowed to be much larger than a building ever would be allowed on that property, because they combined old cabins and this kind of rundown bikerish bar type place that was on the site. They had been given the parking that is there, and it was specifically to not exceed that because there was concerns of neighbors having too many people at a facility and having outdoor noise and the sort of ruckus that can commonly happen at a bar, is what it boiled down to. And so I think when we look back at the history of how that property formed, one of the intents was to not have parking beyond this. If the intent had been to have more parking, and maybe it wasn't needed at that time, the Planning Commission likely would have put through a proof of concept for parking on site or elsewhere that they would have had to build. And so I think that while there's merits in having the council, and I will completely respect if the council decides to allow parking on North Shore Trail there and make those adjustments, I don't know that that is necessarily something we should really do via this specific program that's really targeted at improving the face and the look of businesses in our town. And I don't know that adding parking adjacent to North Shore Trail does that. I don't know that it actually improves the value of the business either for future tax base, like many of the other proposals that are coming forward to us today.
Other thoughts?
What happens if they leased
Can you
it from
speak,
us?
can you speak into your mic, though?
Is it possible they could lease that from us?
lease the space?
Yeah, lease the parking is $1,500 a year. We
Um,
maintain it, we don't have to deal with it. Didn't we already kind of clash with the watershed or somebody on it?
Well, this is a independent project, so it wouldn't be a city project. The landowner will be installing the parking under their own contracted agreement. So the council, when we briefly discussed this in the past, hadn't talked about leasing space in the right-of-way. It was more about trying to solve the underlying kind of need through there. And the owner's willingness to pay for this as well as maintain it, I think, was an asset to the council. I think President Erickson, Commissioner Roberts might be able to speak to that better, but the contemplation of leasing the space wasn't brought up at all.
No, it was never discussed. This was just an idea that was, conceived and brought forward to council, as I recall. And there was a couple of different options. One was the parallel parking that was approved by council. Also, there was angled parking, like has been done on the grass, and that was widely kind of rejected, just from a safety concern standpoint. And so the council's decision was to approve, because there, according to engineering, there was plenty of space the way it was being designed. And so council's decision was to approve those 6 spots, with the caveat that Pizza Pub was covering the cost of that and maintaining it, which was the biggest issue from a public works standpoint. Now, you could argue, we see what the cost of those 6 spots are, and now they've asked the city to cover half of that through this program, which may or may not qualify for, depending on what this body decides. But is that a pretty good summary, as you recall it? Anything you'd add?
We didn't talk about, a leasing cost, and I have talked about it with the landowner at Pizza Pub, and I think they're fully prepared to pay for the entire parking. I think their ask is, does this work with this program, and would you be willing to cover half?
Anybody remembers this spring, what it looked like? If we're looking for aesthetics,
Yeah,
it looked horrible.
President, can I ask staff, Gabby, a question? Did you say at the beginning that as it was prior to putting the trap rock down, that was totally legal? And where it became illegal, it violated some of the different zones or ordinances or zoning was when he did do that?
Yeah, I can't say it was completely illegal. It was in violation potentially of parking laws, but our parking laws aren't a function of your zoning and your development regulations. So it'd be just like if anybody from the general public just wanted to, a Dollar Tree patron just decided to park on 61. Like, that's just where they're gonna park, right? It's gonna be parking enforcement matter, not necessarily a zoning land use matter. Oftentimes, I think the complaints come to the zoning land use offices because it's like, well, that's their business. But at the same time, it's a general member of the public parking there. So it was when they physically came in and deposited material in the right of way that then we started to have a violation. Argument could have made the parking destroyed the boulevard, and they have to maintain the boulevard, but that just gets started to get very nuanced in the code.
So just to clarify, are they approved to do this yet?
This would go, the formal agreement between the landowner and the council will go on Monday. So the landowner is just asking the EDA if you'd be willing to contribute, and then we'd bring all of that to the council on Monday.
So they would be doing it either way, if we contributed it or not?
Yes, they have not signed the agreement, but they have gone out and obtained the quotes and have the agreement in hand and have indicated that they would put this in as soon as the city is ready, but wanted to know if the EDA would be willing to pay for half.
And so if I can add a little bit to that, I think, much as they said they would be agreeable to that, to President Erickson's point, you're talking about 6 additional spots for $20,000. I think there might be some hesitancy. I think there was maybe an assumption that staff was supportive of this and that there would be some help. And then if they don't do it, we end up with the same mess that we had this spring, we've had the last 2 years. So, although I guess I'm more, if I have any agreement with Commissioner Langness, it would be on the the tax exempt piece of it as to deny it. It wouldn't be on the other merits, my personal opinion. So if there's a comfort level to make a change somehow on that, or if we just approve it, doesn't matter. I'm willing to support either way, but if there's some angst about that, maybe there's a change in the.
We
Can you
wouldn't,
change the tax exempt part of that they're going to save to taxable? Attach it to the taxes on the building?
I don't know because we're not actually giving them the land. We're not leasing them the land. Because they have a maintenance, the county could be picking that up and saying, this could be kind of considered yours. it's probably unlikely that it'll change to taxable. To just comment on Commissioner Roberts and Commissioner Langness's concern, if there was the desire to change the policy, we'd have to change the policy before approving the resolution or reconsidering the agreement. But I would also just kind of piggyback on Commissioner Langness's point that this is a legal non-conforming use, and as Commissioner Hoyt pointed out, that has been a problem since it opened. And I'm not saying that it's up to this body necessarily to be a fixer of those problems, but there are mechanisms in which we can help support a business try to do better, try to meet the demand that they have. You know, it's really hard because right now what's going to end up happening if the parking doesn't go in, patrons will end up getting ticketed. Now, that's not to say that that's a bad thing. It's just now we're going to be penalizing the public and or patrons of the business for the business being so successful in, yes, a legal non-conforming use.
Well, I mean, that's.
But that does not
The
necessarily,
ticket, well, before you even get to eat, they're gonna just turn around and leave. That place will be closed in 6 months.
but that doesn't necessarily mean the EDA has to be responsible for that. I can see how this doesn't, with the conversation that's gone on, I can see how you would not want to set a precedence necessarily for the creation of, using EDA dollars for the creation of public parking adjacent to a property. But I could see it the other day, and that's why I brought it to you.
Member Chair, if I could make one more point. So I'm not sure where votes are standing here or all members' opinions on where this might go. But I would suggest, my vote, if it had to happen today, is going to be a no on this for established reasons. And I don't know that that's going to change. If you're inclined to say yes, I would suggest tabling this to the next meeting so that the council discussion and approval that is happening next week, you said?
On Monday, yep.
On Monday, happens before you push this money forward. And then we're potentially in another headache of, well, we applied this money and it's locked up in that, and council hasn't made a decision. And so I'm not really sure that we should be applying funds towards something that hasn't been approved either.
Didn't you say that part of the consideration when they meet next week is that part of the funding would come from here to help them out, or not?
No, I think I said the whole thing would go to the council on Monday, but your decision is independent of the council's decision. I do like Commissioner Langness's approach in that the landowner is willing to do this and the city and approves it. Having an executed agreement that the landowner indicates their willingness to pay for the whole thing, then maybe coming back and asking for some contribution may be more appropriate than whether or not you want to tie up funds before they have final approval from the council.
Just for point of clarification, if we did approve this tonight, are the funds encumbered if the council doesn't approve, or is it?
No, they have to complete the project before we will reimburse. So the way the system is set up is tonight is the only time this comes before you. The agreements essentially say, go do your work, submit to staff your proof that it's done, and then staff will issue a reimbursement. So the money kind of sits locked up until the work is done, but if the council says no on Monday for some reason, then that just frees that money up.
Well, I'm willing to entertain a motion unless there's any further discussion of either, well, whoever wants to make a motion to table or
I
Not?
move we table it
Okay.
until after the council meets.
have a motion to table this resolution relative to Pizza Pub.
0707-2502.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of tabling, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed. And the motion carries. All right. Forest Lake Family Dental. Who has questions about the third resolution brought forward for approval tonight?
So then it just seems like someone would need to make a motion to approve 07072503.
I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 07072503, approving Forest Lake Family Dental.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And it's approved. All right, we have two more projects brought before us. We don't have resolutions for tonight.
Maybe I'll just give you a quick heads up on both of these. I knew that both of these projects were kind of coming through the pipeline, did not get in ahead of the projects in the same timing as your amendments were being made. Roll Seth Drug, I know on the staff report it includes siding, roofing, et cetera, but there was a lot more done on this project. Jim Garrison is here, he can tell you that, and I can walk through the breakout of costs, but this is a $250,000 project, and as a reminder, $10,000 is the cap. So it definitely, the $10,000 definitely covers 1/4 of just the siding work. The siding alone would be eligible for this project. That project started, the building permit was issued on May 20th of 2025. Just a reminder, your program was adopted the first week in June or second week in June. So it was just within a matter of weeks that that permit went out before this program was updated. And then with the building that OSI is in, 147 Lake Street North, you've probably also seen siding. That project, the permit was issued in, it's hard for me to tell if it was November or December of '24, but they did not actually start work until this spring, fairly close again to that same time period. Both of these are after the fact applications. Your policy is specific that they need to ask for permission first, but because they were such high-profile projects in the downtown area, they were encouraged to apply, come before you, have the conversation of whether or not you'd like to make an exception for these two projects. So these are up for discussion, and then based on this discussion, whether or not direction for staff to bring back new resolutions and agreements for your consideration.
All right, thank you, Abby.
Couple questions. Abby, I think in an email, you'd mentioned maybe that the funds might be close to being extinguished for this year. Would that include those two projects? Or-
Yeah, so if you fund all of the projects tonight, we'd be sitting at, what is it? Just under 45,000. So we're getting close. But that being said, I think that there was a fairly large rush because it had some energy. I think that it won't be hard to use the funds this year. And then I think we have to just kind of think about strategy in coming years. Maybe it's after the fact or something. I'm not sure, but how we kind of spread that out a little bit.
I think on both of these, this might be the case, I'm not 100% sure, but Commissioner Hoyt reached out to RELSA to let them know about the project. I reached out to the property manager of the OSI building to let them know about it, so they had already started, and I wasn't aware, just driving by, I could see that something's being done, and I think that was probably the same thing with Commissioner Hoyt, and reached out, and so it just goes back to just the people not being aware of
Yeah.
this program, and so, and I know that staff is gonna work at, when these things come through, letting them know, be aware of that. So with that being said, I think, to your point, two really great projects downtown, and I would be supportive of including those in a future resolution to approve.
Thank you. Any others? Yeah.
Yeah, similar to Pizza Pub, the policy we approved in ineligible projects specifically states improvements started prior to EDA loan agreement approval. And I will say that this is one that if the resolution is very clear in establishing that this project happened at the point of transition of our policy, This is something that I can see as a reasonable exception to allow that. For both this one and the next one. I'll just save the same statement on that one. But it makes sense here on why we would allow that particular exception, because when they started, this policy didn't exist, and they couldn't have applied as it's written. I'm glad that staff pointed out the roofing piece as well. That did raise my concern in my notes, because our policy also states that it has to be improvements that are visible from the street or lakeside park. And rural Seth Drug has a flat roof that's, I mean, you'd have to be really tall to see it from street level. So.
Well, I know that siding's standing there next to the building, ready to go, so
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it, for sure. Any other comments? Okay. You're not looking for a resolution, you're just looking for direction.
Just looking for direction. It seems like most of you are in favor of including these in the program this year, so direction I get is just to bring back resolutions and agreements for your consideration at your next meeting.
Maybe to Commissioner Legnus's point, if there's a way to word it so that it's noted that, you know, what he said about the
For
timing
that
of it.
kind of exception.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, well, that is the end of our regular agenda. Or
No,
no, oh, it's not on there, though. Oh, the budget, there it is, I'm sorry, 7B.
just hidden.
And all those numbers roll together. So 2026 budget.
Sure. So at your last meeting, the EDA requested staff to provide additional materials regarding the 2026 proposed budget, included finalization of salary information as well as understanding how the EDA's salary savings this year could be applied to the 2026 budget, showing potentially no increase in the EDA's budget for 2026. I'm really glad that you guys did that because it gave me an opportunity to dig a little deeper into the 2025 salary and 2026 salary to understand that there was some misconceptions in terms of our salary usage, salary contributions in 25. So when my position was created a number of years ago, the intent would always be that the general fund would pay 50% of my salary and the EDA would pay 50% of my salary. But last year that number changed where the EDA's contribution was only 40%. So in taking a look at the numbers here, we have quite a bit of a jump, I would say, in salary because that's trying to accommodate for that shift from 25 to 26. Regardless of that, with all considerations and reviewing this year's expenditures, it does look like we'll have about $20,000 of unspent funds. So I am going to pull up these different budget scenarios for you because there's a few different ways that I think the EDA kind of thought about how we could approve our budget this year. Give me a second. So included in these budget scenarios was budget scenario 1, that underneath this one, the EDA affords the City Council a proposed budget with no increase. So what that would essentially do is there would be $32,580 that the EDA would use fund balance to fund. This will drop the EDA's fund balance by about 10%. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just can you remind us what our fund
Yep.
balance is?
It's just, I think I included it in here.
I didn't see it.
Maybe I pulled it out. After the sale of the 280 Broadway property, it's just right around 300,000.
300.
So then you add in the 20 in spent funds, that's where it's about 10% of your fund balance the rest of the year. So that is budget scenario 1. Any additional questions at the moment? Budget scenario 2. Underneath this scenario, the EDA affords the council a proposed budget of a 5.9% increase. Under this scenario, the 2025 budget savings of that approximately $20,000 would be applied to the EDA's 2026 budget, and the remainder of the 26 increase of $12,580 would be levied. Proposed budget number 3, under this scenario, the EDA affords to the council a proposed budget with a 13.09% increase to account for increases in staffing salary adjustments. The EDA would then accommodate other increases, that $4,000 for operating and contracting needs through the fund balance. And then scenario 4, the EDA affords to the city council a proposed budget with the total 14.79% increase. Though it's undesirable to forward on a budget increase of 14.79%, as a reminder, your budget is fairly nominal. It's less than $250,000. But that being said, staff would recommend the EDA consider proposed budget scenario 3. That would be the 13.909% increase to accommodate for those wage adjustments, because the EDA's wages in '26 are, I would say, over and above kind of customary inflation increases to change from that 40%, 60% this year to the 50-50. That was the intention. So tonight I'm asking you to discuss the proposed budget scenarios and then take some action, move to approve a budget scenario, and then direct staff to bring back a resolution. The reason I don't have a resolution in front of you tonight is with 4 different scenarios, I didn't want us to necessarily be editing a resolution live stream. So as long as you move to approve a proposed budget scenario, that's enough to me then kind of keep moving that forward with the council and get them the formal resolution in the budget process.
All right, thanks,
Any
Abby.
questions?
Yeah, questions for Abby? Go ahead.
One question. The, the staff wages that was less than appropriated correctly?
Yeah.
On this year's budget that's being adjusted, is that being proposed from staff negatively offset from the other budget that it was coming from? Are you following me? So it was scheduled as 40/60 currently. I assume 60 somewhere else.
From the general fund. So then it would be 50% general fund, 50% EDA.
And so the general fund is
Will be
being proposed to be 10% less on that line item?
I believe so. I will double check with our finance, but yes, it should end up being that shift essentially from the 10% less to go then. Yes, I believe so. I'll have to look back. Forgive me, there are different budgets, and I just don't have all of those numbers sleuthed through yet.
Okay.
But that is a great question. I just don't have that answer tonight for you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Can I follow up on that one?
Yeah.
Is that a policy change the council has to make, or they've already made?
The council hasn't really discussed that. I don't, this is just one of those things that when I was hired, or in 22, when the position was reinstated, it'll be 50-50, right? We had a number of staffing changeovers, from the budget that was the 23 budget that was drafted in 22 to finance staffing changes from the 25 budget preparations in 24. I don't know that it was conveyed necessarily to finance staff at that time that it was supposed to be 50-50. And I think staff that was here at that time was trying to crunch the numbers in ways that were favorable to the council and to not necessarily to keep the tax rate and the levy increases as low as possible. So I'm not exactly sure how that affected the 2025 budget, but it is something that we can bring up to the council as the council kind of has their budget discussions this year.
I would think, though, at the end of the day, it won't affect the tax levy one way or the other, because Abby's salaries roll up to the tax levy either way, whether it's line item into the EDA or over to administration. So I think it's kind of a moot point, but.
Member Chair, the reason I had asked was at the last meeting I had expressed that we should I had urged that we maintain a flat budget and not have a huge increase. Although if it's a shift just merely from one line item to another, I'm amicable to that positive adjustment on our budget being proposed, knowing that it is being negatively offset somewhere else. So that's why I'd asked the question.
No, fair enough. And by maintaining a flat budget, am I correct in understanding that do you not want to increase some of these things that are being called out for increase, like planning and contract services, or just absorb those additional increases through our fund balance, i.e. scenario one?
Yeah, my advocacy at the last meeting, and I would say it's the same today, is that we find ways to absorb that within our fund balance. And I know that at the last meeting, we had some discussion that potentially there's money from land sales that will land in the EDA's pockets and those types of things that I think will offset that for us and be able to use that type of funding. But if the submission is merely a percentage increase that is reflective of the staff portion, I'm supportive of that percentage increase. I'm not sure that exactly landed in one of those four scenarios.
Yeah, I think that's scenario 3. That was my intent with scenario 3, is to show that the increase is exclusively due to the salary adjustments, and that isn't well shown here. Really, you would just have a $4,000 of the 32,580 that would be absorbed by the fund balance. The rest would be requested as part of a tax levy increase to just keep our wages where they were supposed to be in that 50-50 realm,
So 13.9%.
the 13.9%.
As much as I'd like to keep it flat, I would be agreeable to that as well.
So you're scenario 3 and you're 3 or 1?
I'm 3, knowing that there's a negative offset elsewhere in the finance, and I'm going to trust staff is going to look at that, and if they learn that that is not the case, they would bring that back to us, knowing that that is potentially one of the reasons why we supported this.
Any other thoughts or questions from the side of the table?
Do we need, I don't know, do we need council to actually make that decision as to where the
Yeah,
percentage is? I mean,
You'll make, so this body makes recommendation to the council through the resolution. Ultimately, the council has the authority to approve the tax levy increases or changes or not. So you're essentially saying, hey, council, this is what we think we should do. We should rebalance our wages, please, to that 50-50 or not, but that's what the EDA is asking, and then ultimately it would be back into the council's hands to determine that.
And so this probably isn't, well, it might be, it's recommending, but do you think when we get staffed up and that in your department that you will be spending 50% of your
I
time
do.
on EDA type?
I do.
Okay.
And so even right now, I mean, even though I'm not necessarily out at trade shows and whatnot, I do look at a lot of the work that I'm doing in just trying to build better business practices and clean up code and, shaking hands and smiling a face, because I don't know that has always been around here, helps the overall economic climate of the community. But yes, I do believe that once we have both the assistant director and the planner back in place, that you're gonna see a lot more of us having more than 2 agenda item meetings, so.
Any other discussion? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion for a recommendation to the council.
I move we approve scenario number 3.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Scenario 3. All right. Good conversation. Next item, just number 8, discussion. Is there anything discussion-related items to come up?
The only just verbal update I would provide is that we have continued on our assistant director hiring process. That was going to be the EDA planning manager. You would probably see this person some and really helping in just some of those development regulations, creating better business-friendly climate. I'm hoping that by the end of this month, we'll have a candidate on the council's agenda, and then early fall, we'll have somebody here be another face that you'll see pop in and out every now and then, but mostly they're going to be helping really manage that current planning environment, that kind of frontline business interactions right now that we just don't have the staffing capacity for. And then also, just as really fun fact, gotten 2 inquiries this month for indoor playgrounds. So just a different type of business in Forest Lake that I think is going to be a really good attribute to the community. I know I have a young child, and those winters can get pretty stir crazy. Any time of the year can get stir crazy with a little one, but just thought I'd kind of give you guys at least something new that I've been hearing about.
Awesome. Thank you, Abby. We'll move to updates.
Oh, that's what that was.
There you go. Perfect. Did you hear anything from Washington County? Any updates from Chris?
No, Chris sends his regards. He and Mark and I recently met to talk about Headwaters 123. Our data center folks have elected to not continue our negotiations. So it's my hope that at your meeting in August, right? Yeah, your meeting in August, we'd come back with kind of potentially some direction on Headwaters 123 in terms of how we want to kind of go about engaging in the development with the development community about master planning and potential build out of that site. We do have one user that may be interested in locating on the site and is willing to kind of go through a 12, 18-month process if needed. That is a kind of a manufacturing type of business. It's an existing business that would expand into a new product line, so we have some opportunities for different types of funding sources to potentially bring them to Forest Lake. So that's exciting, but Chris does send his regards, and he's helping us kind of work through some plans for Headwaters 123. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Annette?
Okay, thank you, Council and President. A couple of things that I wanted to share with you tonight. First, we have welcomed 6 new members to the Chamber in the month of June, which is a nice number. And that includes a new nonprofit that is just opening across from the high school. They're not actually opened yet, but they've joined the Chamber, and so we'll be helping them get exposure. I did want to mention, too, because I don't know if all of you have heard, we were invited to the Ford grand opening. And again, it's just nice to hear from the president and CEO over there just how well the project worked with the city. Gave huge accolades to the staff and to really everybody involved. And he announced that to everyone that was there through their VIP reception. So makes one very proud to be among a group full of people and hear them singing the praises. And it was a difficult project in general, but not from this standpoint. So really, really happy to hear that. A couple other things. We did have our first Forest Lake area local leaders, which was a collaboration between the schools, our government entities, and the businesses. And I felt that it went really, really well. Most of you were there. And Mayor Blake presented as well, and we've done some surveying, and it just seems that that's really been a touch point that businesses have wanted, and I feel like it really highlighted the impression of community, right? Because we all work kind of in our little silos, but when you bring them all together, it was very, very powerful. So we're planning to do that again in 6 months. So we have a date set for that in December. Then on top of that, of course, our Lake Fest Street Dance is just a couple of weeks away, so wrapping up all the things for that. So our community event, and then on the heels of that is our Chamber Golf event, which is our biggest fundraiser of the year. So those are the key things happening at the Forest Lake Chamber.
Excellent. Thank you, Nanette. Anything else? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Oh, come on.
Nobody wants to leave tonight.
I thought my motion was going to fail.
I really appreciate you guys switching to Monday nights so that we have the opportunity to have more robust discussions, even if tonight's agenda was a little bit lighter. So all those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're out.